Welcome to the Well Prepared Life podcast, where we dive into the fundamentals of readiness for life's challenges, covering topics from personal responsibility to mental and physical preparedness and beyond. Let's forge resilience, nurture growth, and embrace responsibility on the journey to the well-prepared life.
Welcome to the Well Prepared Life, where we forge resilience, nurture growth, and embrace responsibility. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Nathan, and today we're going to talk about leadership, specifically being a leader that's worth following. We kind of were like, what do we want to talk about this week? And this is something that came up. Both of us care about leadership, care about how it impacts people, because it does. We see the effects of that all the world around us. Like most things that are a problem are because of some type of not good leadership or bad leadership in some way.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, so what's the alternative? It's some type of good leadership. And it starts with like who you are as a leader.
Right. It's the soft skills. It's the good character traits that we want to see in people. What are some examples of that, or what's like a big one that you would say?
So the question, as far as not less of an example and more of a question, that I would ask anybody that aspires towards any form of leadership is, would you follow you?
Oh,
like as far as if you were leading and if you had the option and you saw yourself leading, if you're somebody else, would you follow you?
That's a good question.
And think about it in all the context of what that means. The thing that a lot of leadership materials focus on, and there is so much out there. So it's like, by no means take our word as like final.
Right.
This comes from what we've learned from a lot of other people who have spoken, written about leadership. But with this first element of it, as far as like competency is probably the thing that people focus on more than a lot of things. As far as like, are you good at it? Are you good at your job? Are you good at the things that you're supposed to do? We see this a lot in like more technical fields where it's like somebody's good at something and they get promoted into leadership and then they fail at being a leader because they were good at the thing but not good at leading people.
I don't know why that is the number one thing that I think people seek out is competence. So maybe it leads to confidence as a leader.
Well, it's like, because there is like, you have to know at least vaguely around the topic of the thing that you're leading in. As far as like, you can't be ignorant to it.
Sure. Yeah.
Like right now, like you work in cyber stuff.
Yeah.
I couldn't come in and lead your like a cyber shop, like as far as like group of people that's all they do all day.
Right.
Because I don't know enough to even talk to them about it.
Okay. That's fair.
I'm like maybe right on the edge, but it's but with a little bit of work and like working like to lead, it's like I don't necessarily also need to be the one that can like program and get into all the weeds to be able to lead well. I need to be able to know how to like connect with people and like use people as a resource well.
Yeah. Like construction, you don't need to know how to build a house straight from foundation to the roof.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know how to do every single piece of it.
Right. You know the basics.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair.
But you know what's required to build the house.
Yeah.
And at the very least, you have people that know that you can lean on to make sure that happens.
Yeah. Okay.
So competency gets focused on a lot, but we want to focus more on like character. As far as being the person that other people would want to follow. So while an element of it is competency, character is, I don't know that I would say it's overlooked, but it's definitely not emphasized, especially in a lot of secular contexts. As far as like, is this person that you would follow somebody that you know is going to stand up for you, even if it's not easy for them?
I would say that character should be more important than competency for leadership, because you can learn the competency. You can learn the stuff that you need to. You can't really learn character sometimes, you know what I mean? Yeah,
to stick with the C theme, I would say yes with the caveat of, I'm using lots of C's. Yes with the caveat of, do they have the capacity for learning that thing?
That's good.
Because it's like, yes, people can learn competency, but like we talked about like having a growth mindset and capacities that people have. But if their starting point is here and they need to be up here, like they may not be able to get there in the time it takes to actually be an effective leader. So so competency can't be ignored at all.
Sure.
Like, but I see what you mean.
But more important, character.
Like if somebody's competent but doesn't have character, then that's the disqualifying factor.
Yes.
Like that would be how I would look at it.
Okay.
But, and also if somebody has good character but doesn't have any competency, also getting disqualified from that role. Like as far as like,
that's what I was going to ask you.
Like it goes both ways.
What are your thoughts on that one? Okay.
Well, because you have like the 3 C's of hiring that are pretty common in a lot of categories as far as like character, competency, and chemistry. So it's like your fit with the team.
Oh, that's a thing?
Yeah.
The 3 C's?
3 C's of hiring is a thing. We use it here at my church, but I know that I've heard it other places as well. But yeah, character, competency, and chemistry. And it's like really, if any one of them is like bad, it's kind of like, let's not do it.
Okay.
You find a different place to work.
That's interesting.
Because it's like, because it all affects the team and what happens and the outputs.
Yeah.
And so like the first step of being a person of character in a leadership position is, do you care for other people?
What does that matter? What does caring for other people matter about getting the job done? You know?
Yeah. Well, I look back to a personal story in my life of when I was at Liberty University leading a ministry team and traveling. I was leading the band, and part of that role was making sure that we had all the songs memorized, making sure that it was excellent, making sure that we were ready to go for all of our like weekend conferences that we did. And I focused heavy on those things. We practiced hard, we worked hard, we moved forward. But we didn't really like play at all. And we didn't like, I very much was focused on, we need to get stuff done. We need to get stuff done. And I would rarely, if ever, ask a question of like, how are you guys doing? Like how's life? What are you doing? And what that turned into, and thankfully I was able to I got like challenged by my leader to be like, hey, people are talking about leaving because of your leadership.
Yeah.
And the hard part is that I did a lot of work to turn that around.
That's good.
But what I found with that is like people still left. And I don't know if that was like, I can't say with 100% certainty that was my fault or not.
Yeah.
Some of them, I think it was like, hey, they had other stuff going on that they just wanted to pursue instead.
Yeah.
But it's like people left because at the very least, like at the early part of the year, because I wasn't a good leader. And if I would have been a better leader, maybe they would have stuck around, even if they had other things they maybe preferred to do, kind of thing. And in contrast with that is like the next year with a new team, like thankfully, like my leader trusted me to be like, hey, I saw what you did to like work and change and grow. So I'm gonna trust you to like continue leading, even though you had like 100% turnover.
Everybody.
Literally everybody on the band left that year.
Dang, that's crazy. So you got a new clean slate.
And so I was like, I'm going to shift how I do things. And I focused on like connecting with the team and having fun together, still emphasizing like we need to do excellent work. Like we need to be good at what we do, but it's like actually leaning into that. And that was such a fun year.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. Like, and we had a good time together, and it was like, we laughed together and we enjoyed the time that we had. And it's like, I still had room to grow in caring for people as a leader, but that was like one of the first big steps that I took in that. And it shifted how I connected and led people from a like, hey, we just need to get the job done, to it's like, hey, let's like get it done while we enjoy doing it together. And it's like, so when you emphasize caring for people, one of the words that I like to use in the phrases is like, I wanted to add value to them. And I wouldn't have had that language at that point in my life, but it's like, that's when I look back is like, I want them to feel like it's worth it to be a part of this, because I've felt like I've been poured into, cared for, and developed, that I've grown as a person because of being on this team, and not because of like the hard growth of like, well, I got to suffer through, but like the good growth of like somebody's pouring into me. Yeah.
Adding value. I think we've got a list of character traits that are like good character traits for a leader.
Yeah.
I think every single one of them can be said that it adds value.
Yeah.
To the team, to the person. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a foundational element of like what it takes to be a good leader is like kind of asking yourself the question, does this add value? And seeking to pursue that. And that also is like a good leader is looking to do that for their team specifically. So that does add value to, say, your boss, like to your employees, but also to like the customer or the outward facing person, whoever you're trying to serve with the job that you're doing. Does it add value to them? Because the reality is, if it doesn't, you're probably not going to have a job for too much longer, because people aren't going to pay for it because you're not bringing value into their life. Like people pay for things that add value.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And they will choose not to if they say, yeah, this isn't, even if they maybe did at one point, but it's not anymore. They'll say, hey, this isn't worth it anymore. I'm not getting as much as I am, like, I'm paying this much, and I'd rather put, like, I'm not getting enough value out of it to be worth it for me to pay this anymore.
Something that comes to mind regarding caring for the team was, I think Simon Sinek, however you pronounce it. Leaders Eat Last book, author, and a couple others. He has a couple of YouTube videos, and one of them it talks about the circle of trust. I think that's in the Leaders Eat Last book.
Okay, I haven't read it, so go for it.
So it's like this circle of trust. If you're in a team and you're leading a group, and your team doesn't feel like they can trust everybody in the circle, then they're not going to work together well. So if you can establish a circle of trust, and I think trust comes from caring. I think we talked about that before.
Yeah.
Where trust, like caring for people, showing that you care for them
Yeah,
and
it's
love
like
them
knowing
as a
them and
person.
caring them.
Right.
Having their best in mind.
Yes. Yeah. The best interest in mind. Yeah. Yeah. We talked about that.
Yeah.
And then not being manipulative. Then they can trust you, and then that establishes that root of trust, and they kind of build that trust from there. So yeah, just something to come to mind of if you haven't checked out the YouTube video, check it out from Simon Sinek. I'm probably butchering his last name, but yeah, it's worth checking out.
Yeah, and it's that idea of like chemistry kind of coming in there, where it's like you want your team to mesh together well, because when they mesh together well, they're gonna like bounce ideas off of each other and work together well. They're not like we talked about in like I think it's the last episode, if not within the last couple episodes, conflict, and conflict is good, and you do want people to have good conflict about issues, but it's like you don't want character attacks, and you don't want people that despise each other or dislike being around each other on the same team. You want people that enjoy working together to be in the same team together. And yeah, you want people that trust each other to both get the job done, but also, hey, if something happens in my personal life, you're not going to make fun of me for it. Even if they had that thought, they're like, be like, you just probably had a rough day.
Yeah.
They're going to like give you the benefit of the doubt and work with you.
If you have an established connection and trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you wrote this down. A good leader cares for others, but then a good leader is, and we have this language here at Mosaic a lot, is a thermostat, not a thermometer.
Right.
Can you describe that?
Yeah. So I'm thinking of, I think we talked about it in emergency situations. If someone is able to bring a calming presence, if someone's able to bring a positive outlook to the team or to the group, then that person's being the thermostat versus the thermometer. They're setting the temperature, so to speak. They're setting the mood versus just kind of riding the wave of what everybody else is feeling. Yeah. And I think a good leader, when I see a good leader, when I think of good leaders, they're able to bring a calming presence, be clear, be positive, whatever the mood needs. If you need to be serious for a discussion, the leader is the serious one in the room, kind of thing. So they set the tone versus just riding whatever everybody else is feeling.
Yeah, set the tone is like great language for that, because they are determining the feel and, like, for lack of a better term, the vibe of the room. They are making that happen and setting that up. They're not responding to like a random thing that happened or allowing them to be incredibly distracted. Like a leader that's a thermostat avoids, whenever possible, having like big blowups. As far as they're not unpredictable. They're patient. Consistent.
Yeah. Okay.
That doesn't mean that they don't get excited or even don't get angry. But that when they do get excited or angry, you're not surprised or shocked by how they handle that. Yeah. Like there's a phrase from Craig Rochelle. It's like, great leaders do consistently what good leaders do occasionally. But that consistency is the thing that people who are like looking to a leader want to see. They want to see somebody who is trustworthy and reliable.
And back to the point, value added. It should be consistently value added to the situation.
When somebody is consistent, reliable, trustworthy, you can come to them with most things and know that it's not going to be like, I'm disowned because I brought a hard thing to you. Right. Or it's like, you think about volatile leaders in maybe like this is kind of a hypothetical situation, but like in a tech environment where it's like you have a volatile leader who is, you say, hey, we thought this project was going to get done in this time, and now we just found out some new information that it's not. It's like, he's like, you guys better get this together or else I'm going to fire you. Like, as far as like, that's like an extreme example. Right. But I even think of like, my wife works with some people that just don't understand all of the work that goes into certain elements of like what they do. And my wife's job is like senior operations manager to like make all of those things work together. Nice. And one of the things is like people come in, they're like, I want to start a bunch of projects. And they're like constantly starting, not realizing that how much weight that puts on other people. And then on like Tara specifically to come in and be like, hey, like, we can't do this right now. So it's then hard also because they have to tell them no, but that's because their person is not consistent. They're just like only looking at the next thing, not looking at like, what does it look like to be stable and consistent?
Okay. That's interesting. You kind of have to be a little bit proactive too, which kind of is the next trait. You have to be proactive in setting the temperature, proactive in setting the tone and deciding the priorities. So what are some good and bad traits of being proactive versus reactive.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would say this. I don't think there are any bad traits of being proactive.
Okay.
I like.
All right.
There's never a bad time to be proactive.
Yeah.
And the reason is that because what that doesn't mean is that you're not flexible.
Okay.
So to be proactive is not to be inflexible.
You can always follow as a proactive person. You can follow the leader if you're not the leader.
Yeah, like I just finished the first habit of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And that first habit is be proactive. It's like how he lists it. But he gives an example of a boss that was constantly micromanaging people, constantly getting in all the weeds of stuff. He's high executor, like did his job well, but he's just like did not trust his people to get anything done. And everybody complained about it, didn't like it. But one of the guys that worked for him was like, you know what? I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to lean in. And he started like doing research ahead of time into like what questions would that guy ask? What does he like? What does he not like? What is the things that he would probably want to know? And he started putting all this stuff together and building projects. And he came in and like presented it to him. And the guy was like, hey, you asked all the questions, like you answered all the questions that I was going to ask.
Nice.
And in the next meeting, when he went around and like basically grilled everybody else for doing that, when he got to him, it's like, hey, you have any thoughts? Like he asked for his opinion because he saw that that guy was proactive and like did the work to do it. And so even under a bad leader, you can choose to be proactive.
That's interesting. Okay.
And the phrase that a lot of people have said, it's not an uncommon thing. We couldn't find a specific person to quote from it. But it's like, you are ridiculously in charge of your life. And you're like, another way of putting that is you are ridiculously in charge of you. Nobody, like we talked about this when we talked about personal responsibility early on, where it's like, no one can make you do anything.
Right.
You can only be influenced by people, and it's up to you to decide how you respond to those influences.
It's like the 90-10, even if it's 10% your like responsibility, your fault that you had a fight with that leader, that boss, and that you're getting yelled at for not having the presentation. That person, that a good proactive employee, took the 10% and did the research ahead of time.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what can I do to get better so that the 90% is not happening? Just trying to be proactive with that. That's an interesting thing.
And so we talked about that from like the follower side.
Yeah.
That. But from a leader side, to be proactive is to think about what are the anticipated needs of whatever industry you're in. What are the things that my employees are going to run into? What are the things that the people I lead, my volunteers, if you're in a volunteer, like what do they need to do their job well? How can I make sure that they're equipped and don't feel like they're left out to dry? And because like I know for my role, I lead a lot of tech positions, and it's like I need to make sure that they're trained well so that when I ask something of them on a Sunday, then they're like, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Like, and so for me to be proactive is to make sure that they have good training. And I'm not always great at that, but it's like, that's the goal. The goal is that I can anticipate the things that they're going to run into enough to equip them to be able to deal with them and handle it. And what that also means is that I don't do it on my own.
You let them do it.
Well, not even let them, but it's like I find other people to help me figure out what those anticipated needs are.
Okay.
Because I'm one person.
That's a good
I can't
point.
think of every single thing that they might need.
Okay.
But I have like a team of coordinators that I work with. And so it's like when we try to have like meetings about once every 6 to 8 weeks. And in those meetings, we talk about like, hey, what are the things that you're seeing are popping up as issues like consistently? What are the things that we need to like hone in on and focus on? And we're not always able to move quickly on that. But we always want to take steps forward in making improvements and like shifting how we like interact with people, make sure people are cared for and they have what they need, because we want people to like feel like it's a pleasure and privilege to serve, not like it's a burden. And that's I think
tough though for volunteers. So if you can figure it out and make it work, that's good.
And it's like, and I think that's even more so like, I think we talked about this before, but the mentality of, well, it's your job, just get it done.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not how you get people to like do good work. It's not how you get people, like that's not how you add value to people. Like the only value you can add if you're an employer can't be that you pay them. Like that's not enough. Yeah. People need more than that.
They'll get paid somewhere else.
It's like they'll find a place that cares about them and pays them.
Right.
If they like, as far as if that's all you do for them.
Right.
But it's so essential to like take that first initiative in figuring out how can you make sure that my people have what they need.
And initiative, you said initiative. You got a good definition of that?
Yeah. Definition of initiative is the power or ability to begin or to follow through energetically with a plan or task. enterprise, and determination. So that like to follow through energetically with a plan or a task.
Energetically. I like that.
And so to be proactive is to figure out what step you want to take, and to take initiative is to actually follow through and make that happen.
Nice.
And this kind of thing leads naturally into the next thing, as far as like, you can't have double standards when you're setting this up. You can't say, hey, I need you guys to be all these things, and then not hold yourself to those types of standards either.
That's good. That's good.
Because we want, like, I think in an ideal world, we want all of our like direct reports, the people that like report to us and work for us, we want them to think like leaders, to have ownership, to like make new things happen. And while they may not be like people that are going to take over your role, it's like we want them to take ownership, and part of being an owner is being a leader.
And as a leader, you need to have that word is integrity. I love that word. Is you got to be the same when no one's looking at you versus when everybody's looking at you.
Yeah.
So what do you do? What are your habits when no one's watching? What are your tendencies? So if you're deal with this myself, if I'm lazy or try to find the shortcut, if I naturally tend to go that way, I need to be aware of that so that I can be, follow the process the right way in front of others and in front of, no one. Yeah. There's a level of goodness to having integrity. Are there any downsides in integrity? I don't think there are.
No, there's not a downside to integrity. It's just the downside is how hard it is to do it well.
Right. It does come at a cost.
Well, and
it takes effort.
Yeah, it's just the effort and consistency. Again, talking about consistency, like a person of integrity is a person who's consistent. There's no downside to it. It's just difficult to live it out to its fullest extent. It's always something you can get better in.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anybody's perfect in that area.
Yeah. So next one, being decisive.
Yeah.
And I think another one is timely with decision. So I think we talked about that before, making good decisions in a timely manner. So being able to make that decision is a good step, and then being able to make it quick is another step. What are some thoughts on that one?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's one of the more self-explanatory ones, but part of that might be because I like naturally lean into the decisiveness. Like I don't find it hard to be like, let's make a decision. Let's do it.
Maybe the bad, like the flip is what it looks like when it's done poorly. When you can't make a decision, you get a leader who is very indecisive, not really willing to make a decision to not upset anybody. So then you end up.
I think this goes back to what we talked about last week in the conflict episode of like when if somebody's not willing to enter into something, and like you see an issue, because typically decisions need to be made around issues. Like actions, decision. And so it's like, as far as like something needs to happen, and the person in charge needs to make a decision about that thing. And like from the conflict perspective, maybe you have different people's opinions that have been put into there, and the leader is in a spot of, well, if I go with this one, then I'm kind of like dismissing that guy's opinion, or if I go with this one, I'm like, I'm going to offend this person. And so the indecisive leader oftentimes will also be somebody who like struggled with insecurity because they don't want to like hurt somebody. They don't want to make the wrong decision. And so to be a decisive leader means that you actually take ownership of your decisions. They say, even if this is not everybody's favorite, I'm still willing to step forward.
Right.
Now, you do that in the context of caring for people and wanting the best. So it's not ignoring those other things. But it's actually living into them and being like, you know what, somebody, like one of the big things that's getting pushed, there's this whole subreddit called anti-work, which is just a nightmare, honestly. But it's basically like people shouldn't have to work to like live and do this. And okay, so hear me. I don't mean that businesses and leaders and bosses shouldn't seek like the benefit of their employees and should see like I'm not saying like, hey, pay them minimum wage to do a job that should be more than minimum wage. Like compensate people well, care for them well. That's adding value. So we've already addressed that. Like a good leader seeks to add value. But in this mentality, if somebody's like, hey, I want to get paid the same, but only work half the time. It's like the good leader is like, we're gonna be like, no, I'm sorry. Like that's
laugh.
Like, and maybe not laugh. Maybe like, cause if somebody brings a genuine concern as far as like, I'm struggling. I just need more time. It's like, hey, like, I get that. Where else can I help you to do this? And maybe you do like give them a little bit extra PTO for a period of time to like help them get some time off to rest and recover. But a good leader equips people to like step into good rhythms. Like at our church here, we have a good rhythm that's like pretty much enforced of a Sabbath. And a Sabbath is taking a day of rest. Like from creation account in Genesis, as far as on the seventh day God rested. And that's the example we see for us, that we're supposed to do the same. And so we, on Saturdays, like we're actually like basically directed to be like, hey, if we see that you're working, we're going to talk to you. Like on a Saturday, we're going to talk to you about it. And if you continue to do that, even when we've talked to you about it, about like, hey, you need to figure out a different rhythm. You can't work on Saturdays. Like you got to take that day as a day to rest and recover and to like be ready to come back to work on Sunday. It's like, if that's a consistent issue, which I don't think it has been with anybody that I know of on staff, but it's like, basically the thing is, if you aren't willing to change and to actually like take that time to rest, you can't work here. And it's that serious.
Yeah.
Because they want for us to be cared for and to have that rest and that we need to actually live and work in a rhythm that's sustainable.
And that leads to being more, better decision makers, being able to make better decisions, being able to have integrity. Like it leads into other aspects of life.
Yeah. Like I think of
being a good leader.
Actually, the example I think of Chick-fil-A.
Okay.
Where Chick-fil-A has decided to not have any, like to have all of their locations closed on Sunday.
Yeah. And they still have good revenue, right?
They still have great
profits.
And theoretically, they're missing out on a seventh of their possible revenue.
Yeah.
Like as far as like if they take and average out all the days and be like, and they can make that, and it's a weekend, so it's probably actually a higher percentage than just a straight seventh, because people go out more on the weekends.
Yeah.
And so Chick-fil-A has made that decision. It's a hard decision. And they've made that decision, and they were like steadfast in it, and they've been consistent in it. And now it's a thing that they're known for.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that when they were initially looking at that there was somebody that's like, we got to do this, even if we don't like it. But I'm sure that there were a lot of people down the chain who were like, I don't agree with that decision. We could be making so much more. Why aren't we doing that?
Yeah.
But it took the like decisiveness and like steadfastness of one person or a group of people at the top to be like, no, we're going to hold to this, even if other people would say this isn't a smart business move.
That's good. There's something you were talking about, having a day of rest. It came to mind. I read a book, Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman. Daniel Kahneman, I think is his name. I could be wrong. Double check me on that. But the principle was, if you make a lot of hard decisions, it's you can't make more hard decisions. Like you only have so much energy to make hard decisions. Like the comparison he used was, if you ask a child to do hard multiplication problems and then ask him if he wants to slice a cake, then he's going to say yes to slice a cake, because he can't make the decision not to eat the cake. Whereas if you ask her to do no math problems and you just say, hey, do you want to slice a cake? It's not healthy. You haven't had dinner yet. Then they're going to say no to the cake. So
yeah,
interesting.
I don't know if it's from the same book or from somewhere else, but there's a thing that's called decision fatigue.
Oh yeah, it's probably something like that.
Yeah, so it's a similar concept at the very least.
Yeah.
Maybe the same guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, decision fatigue. That like, we each of us have our own unique capacity for decision making, and that's why it's like, honestly, like entrepreneurship, working from home, and like why you feel so tired on a Saturday when you have nothing to do. Versus how you felt more energy on a work day when you had your normal things that you did every day.
Yeah, because you don't have to make decisions on what you do.
Like if you have a routine, and you say on a Thursday, you have your normal routine, you work through it. You get up in the morning, you make this thing for breakfast, you get dressed, maybe you've picked out your clothes, or you're going to wear the same thing pretty much every day. You go to work, you have your job, all the things that you've done for the day. It's like you have tasks assigned to you. You have to figure those tasks out, but you know what you're working on. You come home, you have a little bit of time where you're like, what free time of like, what am I going to do? Well, in that, what am I going to do time, now expand that to the whole day. Now you're making a call for every single thing that you're going to do. And it's like one of the biggest reasons why people feel exhausted after a day when they had nothing going on.
That's interesting.
Is because they had to make all of the decisions. And so that's maybe a strategy for decision making in general is, I forget where I learned this. This is not from me, but but the idea of pre-deciding.
When you have the energy to make the decision.
Yeah, it might have been Craig Groeschel. I think he does a lot of stuff like this.
Okay.
So definitely check out his podcast on leadership. It's great. But he talks about pre-deciding. And one of the things he does is like, he always makes sure, I mean, whatever he can, he passes off to other people. So that's one thing that I'm like, I wish I had that luxury. But do you decide what you're going to make for breakfast beforehand? Do you decide what clothes you're going to wear the night before? Do you like make it so that when you get up in the morning, you have as few decisions as possible before you actually get into things that are important? You pre-decide so that you're not using that energy the day of, so you can actually have more energy to address the things that are most important.
Interesting.
And sure, like a shirt that you choose is not that big of a deal necessarily, but it's one more decision that you have to keep track of. And that just amplifies with harder and harder decisions.
Yeah. I think this is a good segue into the last one, where if you make the decision, you have that responsibility.
Yeah.
You have that blame, so to speak, and you also get the credit sometimes. But I think the last one, but then was, you don't always need the credit, but you almost always have the responsibility.
Yeah.
So like, how does a leader not always get the credit? How does a leader get the responsibility though?
Yeah.
How does that work? It's like a weird dichotomy.
Well, that makes me think of our executive pastor, Mike, here at Mosaic. One of the things that our lead pastor says often is like, you don't see Mike's name on anything, but if you knew like what's happening behind the scenes, his fingerprints are on everything.
Okay. So as a leader, he's had that responsibility and help make decisions.
Yeah. Through direct involvement sometimes to just like the culture that he set influences the decisions that are made in other rooms.
Okay.
That you're like, if the buck stops with you, it's like you're responsible, but you may not be the one executing on something.
Okay.
And like, honestly, like, you got to set aside some pride, because the good leader, when you want to add value to your people, means that you honor and praise them for the things that are done, even if you're the one that trained them to do it.
Yeah.
And like, but they are still like, a good leader wants people to succeed underneath them. They want people to grow up into leaders and to be people that are dependable and reliable. And what that means then is, even if you put a lot of foundational work, where the actual like end results are coming out are going to be from those people that you led.
Yeah.
So your fingerprints are on everything. You're responsible for everything. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you get the credit for everything.
Right.
Because a good leader, their main motivation for like leading, for whatever they're doing, is not what can I get out of it. Their motivation is like, where can I add the most value to the most people?
Yeah.
Whether that's the employee, the person that works for them, that's the customer, the person who's getting the product, the volunteer, the person coming in who just needs help with something. It's, where can I add value? And again, it's coming back to kind of that final question of like the question we started with actually, is, would you follow you? Are you that type of leader that is worth following because of your character, not just because of how good you are at something?
So what's the challenge? What's an action step for people listening that they can take this week? Maybe?
So I would challenge you, like, if you are not in any position of leadership, I would challenge you to be proactive and look at where you can lean into maybe something that would benefit your team, the people that you work with, where you can like do something that's more than what's asked of you to make the team as a whole better.
So what's something that you can take effort to make better, like to bring value? Don't just
like
go with
think
the flow.
about the example that we talked about earlier of the guy who was like, basically his boss was always micromanaging, and he went out of his way to be like, I'm going to try to answer the questions that he has before he asks them.
Okay. Yeah. That's good.
And so maybe you don't have a boss that's like, you need to answer the questions before, but it's like, what problem can you solve that somebody hasn't brought up yet?
That's good, because no job is perfect. No work environment is perfect. So how can you make it a little bit better by taking that leadership, being proactive?
Yeah.
That's good.
So that's if you're not in a leadership position,
but
lead up is essentially like one of the terminologies for that.
Okay.
In solving problems that other people haven't asked you to solve that need solved.
Yeah.
And if you are in a leadership position, I want you to like evaluate and like think of multiple things, but think of things and pick one thing at least this week where you can remove a roadblock for the people that you lead to make their job easier, to make them more equipped and ready to accomplish the mission of whatever you're trying to do as like in your leadership role.
Get your hands dirty a little bit. You know, take the time, take the effort.
Be proactive in equipping your people equipping your team to do their job well. Because if you have a team of multiple people that you all equip to do it, they will do far more than you are able to do on your own. And so it pays to equip people to do what you can do and better. So that's what it means to be a leader from the character side of things. And yes, competency is important. Chemistry is important. And like those things that are involved in like leadership principles are all good. But it starts with your character at the foundation. And that's what it builds off of. Thank you for joining us on this journey to the well-prepared life. Like, share, subscribe, follow, do the thing so that more people can hear about it. Look for us on social media. We're about to start ramping that up, and you might see some stuff already. But we're looking forward to reaching more people, because we think it helps people, and that's the only way it's going to help people is if people hear it. So we'll see you next time.